Hey guys, CJ and Trev here. Two Hearts One Motorhome. We just did an amazing guided tour of Port Arthur. The guide Colin, he was absolutely amazing and highly recommend to anyone. We're about to head down now to the jetty. There's a little wharf here, and do the Island of the Dead tour. So it's a 40-minute tour of a little island with the burial sites of some convicts and also some soldiers, I believe, and some free people, some locals of Port Arthur back in the day. So looking forward to doing that one, if it's anything like the tour we just did, which was, yeah, that was absolutely awesome. They really know their stuff. They're both historians that do the tours, I believe, and yeah, they really know their history, which is wonderful. Really, really worth coming to check out these tours in Port Arthur Historic Site for sure. Talk soon, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.
Convicts produced anything from broomsticks to boats and ships. And this clearing we're coming alongside on your left-hand side, there's a dockyard where they produced around 200 vessels altogether. The majority of these were longboats or whale boats. Whaling was a major industry in this early colony of Van Diemen's Land, so you can imagine craft like that being in big demand, and ships would travel from all over the world to hunting these very fertile waters. A longboat is a very similar craft, but they were used to transport goods and personnel around the bays and inlets of this early colony, when travel across country was often quite difficult, if not totally impossible. But they built larger ships as well. The largest ship built at Port Arthur was 286 tonnes. She was also the largest ship built in the colony at that point in time. And what you can see sitting in one of the old slipways, there's an artist's sculptural representation of one of those craft under construction. Now, the operation at the dockyard was fairly independent of the rest of Port Arthur. They had their own blacksmith shops where they could make their own metal fittings and fastenings. They had their own saw pits. They used to use steamers. Steamers allowed the timbers to be heated up, makes them more pliable so they can be bent to the appropriate shapes. Up the back of that complex was a big shed where they used to cut and sew the canvas sails, as well as make up the rigging. And of course all of this was under the watchful eye of a master shipwright. The first being John Watson, and later David Hoy, who used to live in that white weatherboard building, one of the oldest surviving wooden buildings in Port Arthur. Now, there was never a problem with the quality or quantity of produce here. The major problem was the ships were very well built, but they were also very cheaply built. They were often sold on the open market for what would be, for a private shipwright, almost cost price. And you can understand that these private entrepreneurs were a bit upset by that. They protested through the Lieutenant Governor's Department and finally had their case heard that they couldn't compete with convict labour in a settlement like this. So eventually the dockyard was closed down in 1848, but not before they had produced 200 boats and ships, and they also used to carry out very handy and timely repairs to any ships around the coast experiencing difficulty. Now, it's quite a pleasant walk around to the dockyard. You just hop onto the road above the jetty, walk along a nice tree-lined avenue and you were there. I recommend take your camera because there are some lovely images to be captured looking out across the bay. The settlement you can see in front is called Carnarvon. It originally started as a few fishermen's shacks and weekenders, but it is a residential area now. But it was actually the site of their brickfields where they used to gather the clay and fire their bricks. They could make tens of thousands per month if it was necessary, and it quite often was. If you keep on following that road, you can make it to Safety Cove, which is an absolutely beautiful beach, and further on, of course, is the lookout and remarkable cave. Not much of a detour, but it's well worth the look. And we're travelling towards a headland which is called Point Puer. It's spelled P-U-E-R, which is Latin for youth or boy. It was named as such in 1834 when they established a specifically designed juvenile prison here. It was the first sanctioned juvenile prison under British control, and the average age of a convict was around 12 to 15, but the youngest of them were only 9 years of age. They were the pickpockets, the petty thieves, who came from the larger industrial towns of Great Britain, but the majority seemed to have come from London and the London districts. And they were the artful dodgers, but very much the real thing. People are often appalled at the fact that they were transporting children as young as 9, but the sadder fact is that the age of responsibility in Britain at this time was age 7. A boy or girl caught and convicted could be thrown into jail at that age, but the problem was it was the same jails for everybody, men, women and children. These places were grossly overcrowded. They were rife with corruption, and the thinking people of the day figured that these young people were actually learning more about the ways of crime within the walls of the prison than they were on the outside. They called these places universities of crime. Lieutenant Governor Arthur was made aware of a similar circumstance with boys being transported to Van Diemen's Land and spending considerable time in the Hobart barracks in contact with established criminals. So the idea of Point Pool was born, and ably assisted by his commandant, Captain Charles O'Hara Booth, they set about trying to change the system. The idea, of course, prime purpose, was to keep the boys well away from the corrupting influence of adult convicts, and particularly those at Port Arthur. They could be taught how to read and write, basic arithmetic, taught trades like carpentry, boot and shoemaking, barrel making, bit of boat building in the early days, stone cutting. Now most of this stonework in the Port Arthur Church and Military Guard Tower would have been carved by these boys, and we assume it's the rougher work that you'll see on the inside of these buildings rather than the finer work on the facings. Of course, they received religious instruction as well. This was moral reformation, and it was compulsory throughout the entire convict system. And once a boy was considered suitable, he could then be taken to a hiring depot, which was out at Newtown, and from there distributed throughout the colony as a useful worker. So they were trying to steer the boys onto a different path, and with their new trade, they're hoping they won't resort to their old trade again and would become an integrated member of the society of these new colonies. Some boys certainly grasped that opportunity. Unfortunately, others didn't. For them, it was hard labour, solitary confinement, deprivation of rations, and corporal punishment. Punishment was part of Point Pool, but thankfully never to the degree that it was applied back at the main settlement of Port Arthur. As we go past this little beach, you can see a stone wall. That's where the saw pits were, and up through the bush you can see a few foundations and footings. This is all that remains of what was quite a large establishment. Most of the buildings had stone or brick foundations, but the upper parts were made out of timber. And when they abandoned this site in the 1840s, they actually dismantled the buildings and recycled the raw materials. Problems with Point Pool was about resources and the fact that it was such a cold, windswept place. All resources had to be taken over there, and this includes water even, all the materials for their trades, rations, etc. So this almost guaranteed contact between the boys and convicts who were performing that task, and the thriving black market would grow because of that, tobacco being the main currency, of course. But it's a very important historic site, the first sanctioned juvenile prison under British control. Now another important historic site, of course, is the small island. This is Isle of the Dead, as convicts like to call it, Dead Island. They were certainly in possession of a less romantic view than the authorities of this place. We believe it's the last resting place of around 1,100 people. The majority of those, as you can imagine, are convicts, but to give them their proper Status, convicts, term means convicted person. Invalids, there's a person who can't work properly because of illness or injury. And paupers, who are men who had grown old within the system and simply had nowhere else to go, no other means of support. And finally, lunatics. The term lunatic means you're off with the moon. In other words, you're suffering severe mental illness. They're all buried along that southern end, and there's not a great deal of evidence of that because it was policy at Port Arthur that convict graves should be anonymous. The thinking being a life which has been lived in shame and disgrace would deserve no lasting memorial.
Way to go.
Thank you.
No worries at all. Will do.
Hello.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
See you in 2 hours.
That's right.
We just got off the cruise to the Isle of the, off the boat actually, the Isle of the Dead cruise. We've got a private tour and we're walking up the jetty. This must be our guide up here. He's walking very fast. That's the boat. Hi, I'm CJ, that's Trev. Do you mind if I record?
No.
Oh, that's good. What was your name?
Bryn.
Bree.
B-R-Y-N.
Bryn. Ah,
It makes me laugh. Some of those young ones always try and sneak on.
they always try.
They always play dumb.
I think you don't know.
Yeah. She tried the diversion tactic, asking me how long it would be and all that. Okay.
I feel very privileged
Yeah,
being
we do.
the only two
Anyway,
people.
Trevor
Yeah.
and Sheree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Trevor, what did you say?
CJ, they call me.
CJ.
Yeah.
CJ. And Trev.
All right. Well, CJ, Trev, welcome to the Isle of the Dead. My name's Bryn. I'm going to try and entertain you with stories about this place till the boat comes round again.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So, let's get on to the island.
Thank
So
you.
It's first aid.
First
Okay.
aid kit.
Nice walkway on here, anyway. It's a good walkway.
Yes, they put them in on the low season of 4-year period,
Okay.
which ended a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
I remember. So, yeah, they make it accessible for everybody.
Makes sense.
more or less.
We're going.
We're going to go straight up.
Straight up.
Hello.
Beautiful location. You're going to be buried somewhere. It's not a bad spot.
No, it's not a bad spot. You guys on holiday?
We are.
Yeah.
Yes. New South Wales.
Okay.
New England region up Armidale, Uralla. Yeah.
Oops, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is nice.
Same sort of weather as here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you've heard on the commentary that the current estimate is around 1,100 people that were buried out here. 900 prisoners. They include paupers and lunatics from the end days of the jail, and up to 200 free people. Now they get those numbers from the death lists, which are incomplete, so there might have been even more than that buried out here.
Okay.
Wow.
Excuse me. Indeed, if you'd have come to Port Arthur, say 20 years ago, they were probably saying around 1,700.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes, the outside of the island is very rocky, but the heart is very soft indeed. In fact, one of the earliest grave diggers is said to have got down to 15 feet before he was told to stop.
Wow.
Wow.
We know that prisoners were buried in coffins. We get that from convict autobiographies and the fact that there were coffin makers at Port Arthur. So once you died at the settlement as a prisoner, obviously your body would end up in the mortuary at the hospital. It would be put in a rough wooden box, taken down to the water's edge, placed on a little rowboat, which is then towed out to the island, and as an ex-prisoner, you were buried without ceremony.
Yeah.
Reverend John Manton, who set this place up in 1833, believed that the prisoners, having lived lives of shame and disgrace, were to be forgotten in death, even though they built the entire settlement.
Yeah.
They
Shame.
weren't- Sorry?
Shame.
Yeah.
The graves were numbered. They had some temporary numbers there to identify the plots, and some of them had wooden crosses apparently, but of course those things wouldn't last the test of time.
Of course, yeah.
Now the stones you can see on this half of the island are called memorial stones. They were allowed once transportation ended in 1853 if somebody could pay for a stone.
Okay.
They're called memorial stones because you can't be certain they are actually standing over the body of the person they're meant to remember.
Yeah.
This one here, believe it or not, is for Australia's first novelist.
Wow.
Yes, he was a criminal. His name was Henry Savory. He came from a very wealthy background in England. In fact, his family was so wealthy they had a crest. And when he came of age, he got into sugar refining, and he kept his business afloat by writing fraudulent credit notes.
Cheeky bugger.
Yeah.
Now he amassed a debt of £30,000.
Which would have been huge back in the day.
Yes, it was huge. How many pounds do you think you had to steal in those days before it became a hanging offence?
Oh, bugger all.
Yeah, it's near close to it. It's £2,
Wow.
40 shillings. So often in court, it said defendants would be found guilty of stealing the equivalent of 39 shillings. So they'd be guilty, they'd have to go to jail for their crimes, but they wouldn't have to die for it.
Wow.
This guy here is 15,000 times over the limit.
Oh, goodness. Death sentence.
He's here somewhere, but that's what the plaque
Yeah,
is.
well, he's pretty blasé about it until he heard about a man called Fauntleroy who was doing the same thing. Fauntleroy was hanged in front of a very large crowd in London. So, sufficiently spooked, Henry took a final £1,500 off his business associate and did a runner. He went down to the south of England and got on a ship to America. He bribed the captain to leave port before the captain was ready. But even so, as the ship is leaving the Isle of Wight, Henry looks down from the bow of the ship and to his dismay sees his business associate and a constable rowing out to meet it.
Oh.
So in despair he throws himself off the ship. However, his ex-partner drags him onto their boat, tricks him on shore, and now Henry is on trial for his life. His friends say to him, "Don't worry, Henry, just plead not guilty and we'll muddy the evidence and you're bound to get off." But Henry thought that if he pleaded guilty, the judge would surely show him mercy. So when he went to trial, he was asked how to plead and he said guilty, and the judge said, "Very well, you shall be hanged."
Oh.
Oops.
Didn't work. Oops.
Yeah.
He was in the condemned cell 20 days. The day before he was due to be hanged, his friends badgered the Home Secretary one more time, and this time the Home Secretary relented and said, "Very well, banish him beyond the seas to Australia."
Ah.
So he arrived in Hobart as a convict, and he was given a job. Guess where it was?
Port Arthur.
No, he was given a job in the Colonial Treasury.
That's like the guy, Catch Me If You Can, the movie. The guy went to jail for doing all that crime over in the States that Tom Hanks played the actor,
Yeah, it's
Leonardo
good film.
DiCaprio or whatever. He ended up getting employed by the FBI
Did
to
he?
catch the people doing the same that he was doing with the fraudulent checks. It's a very similar story.
Yeah, that's a great film. Great
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, so he gets a job in the Treasury and he manages to get his wife and child out to Van Diemen's Land within a month from arriving too. But that's the last bit of great news for Henry, because he argues with his wife when she arrives. He accuses the man who chaperoned her out to Australia and his wife of having an affair on the ship, and Henry ends up back in jail in Van Diemen's Land. His life kind of never recovers. He's in and out of more skirmishes, more forgery, more debts. In fact, that man, he chaperoned his wife, who went back to England and he never saw again, incidentally. Stayed on in Van Diemen's Land and became a judge. And one day Henry ended up in front of him, and this bloke
How ironic.
10 years. Apparently.
Oh, goodness.
While he was
You poor bugger.
in this rough tailspin, he did write Australia's first published novel. It's about 2/3 down. Quintus Servantum it is. It's called. Quintus is Latin for fifth. Servantum is the pseudonym he gave himself, so it's essentially called the Fifth Savoury. He was the fifth son.
Fifth
And
son.
the book is his life of crime put into fiction. Have you read much 19th century fiction?
I haven't, no. But
Well, they tend to have this idea of why use 10 words when 1,000 will do. It takes people 6 pages to get
to
out
get
of bed.
to one chapter, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a torturous read, but it will always be Australia's first published novel.
Wow.
I believe even the Australian writers still have an annual award called the Henry Savory Award for a short story.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Now you
Yep.
say it, yeah. I have heard of that, yeah. How ironic.
By the time he reached Port Arthur, he was 50 years old and a broken man, and he
Yeah.
died in the hospital.
Fair enough.
So he greatly suffered for his art,
Yes.
but how many of the prisoners lying in unmarked graves all out here would have given anything for a fraction of his wealth?
Yeah,
start
absolutely.
There's all kinds of people buried out here. There's even a Waterloo veteran.
Waterloo veteran.
Yeah. John McNally, his name was. He was barely old enough to be a soldier before he was fighting in the Peninsular Wars, which is now Spain and Portugal, isn't it? That horrific battle against Napoleon. It's where the term guerrilla warfare
Yes.
came to be. Absolute carnage. He managed to get through all that unscathed, but his next job was to march through Belgium in the pouring rain for 36 hours in his kilt to meet Wellington at Waterloo and have another go at Napoleon.
Wow.
And he said he was so drenched, and his regiment was so drenched, the Highland Regiment, by the time they arrived at Waterloo, the red dye in their uniforms or jackets was running all down their arms and legs. It was because of that downpour, though, that the battle next day was delayed, because the battlefield was a quagmire, and that probably ended up with Napoleon's loss, because the French delayed their true onslaught because of the conditions. Even so, before McNally's regiment had even fired a bullet, 64 of his comrades, or his fellow soldiers, had been hurt or killed from long-distance fire. Anyway, the battle commenced, absolute carnage, Waterloo. The French were winning, but then the Prussian army came in the late afternoon to back up Wellington, and they managed to overrun the French.
Wow.
And one of the most important battles in European history, that was the end of Napoleon.
Yeah.
McNally survived that with just half of his left arm missing. You know, that battlefield at Waterloo, afterwards, for a long time, people were taking the teeth from dead soldiers to use as false teeth.
Yeah.
And they were very valuable. The skeletons, a lot of the skeletons were also shipped to Hull in England on the east coast and ground up as fertiliser.
Wow.
Gosh. That's fertile soil.
McNally's demobbed now because he's, he can't be a soldier with half his left arm missing. So he has a pub. He meets some unsavoury characters, and I think he gets convicted of housebreaking. He's transported. He ends up at Port Arthur after being shipped down from Murat Island
Yes.
when Murat
Tribuna.
Island closes. And he died of TB after a few months here as the overseer of carpenters.
Wow.
So he's put in the ground here in the early days when Commandant Booth was the commandant, and Charles O'Hara Booth, and he was a very passionate soldier, and I reckon it must have grated Booth to know that there was a Waterloo veteran going down in the ground without any kind of marker on the room at all.
Oh, 100%.
Crazy.
Never think that, would you?
No.
Like,
Nowadays, people would pay thousands to be buried on out something like this.
oh yeah,
Very scenic and isolated.
that'd be amazing. Oh no, this is getting a lot of headstones up here. These are the affluent people, I believe, weren't they? On the high ground.
Wow.
A couple more memorial stones before we talk about the Free Cemetery,
Yeah.
which is just there, of course.
Yep.
Look at this one. You'd be stunned to know that's a memorial stone, wouldn't you? It's one of the best on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
First thing to mention, you see the rope design that goes around the edge?
Yep.
Yeah.
That is the signature of a stonemason called Thomas Pickering.
Okay.
His name at the very bottom there.
Yep.
He was a prisoner. He's got 12 on the island,
Wow.
and he was friends with William Mansfield, who of course
Okay.
was a fellow prisoner.
Yeah.
They were convicted of the same offence in Hobart of housebreaking. They went off to Norfolk Island together.
Mm.
When Norfolk Island closed, they were transferred here with the others. And when Mansfield died, at the age of 32, his friend Pickering was given the job of doing this stone for his friend.
Yeah.
But the question is, who on earth paid for that?
That's right.
Well, it's suggested it was paid for by his father's guilt and remorse, because Mansfield Jr. was transported for taking a pocket watch and a waistcoat off his dad.
Oh,
on a Friday night.
joking.
His dad dobbed him in, and his son was transported.
That'd
Wow.
have a fair bit of weight in it too, being sandstone.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't like to bring that over in a rowboat.
Yeah,
wonder
well, that
what
was
it
part
was.
of the punishment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one with a lovely irony. There was another memorial stone there for a bloke called Ed Coombs. Now, he was transported at age 17 for stealing beef and apples. And he died at Port Arthur at the age of 41. He was killed by a falling tree. But while he was in Australia, he was always in trouble, and he was always stealing things. He had at least 8 or 9 convictions for theft. And then, in 1975, somebody stole his memorial stone.
I was say, did they have many issues with people coming after hours trying to take things
They
away?
probably did years ago when Aussies didn't really care for the convict past, did they?
No.
Because the bushfires, which decimated Port Arthur in the 1890s,
Yes,
there's,
yeah.
suggestions some of those flames were
Deliberately lit.
assisted by
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
local residents. The military area was dismantled, and they used the bricks and timber for other things. Local people were encouraged to take stuff away. Apparently they stole the commandant's sundial. The first tourists here went on a bit of a drunken riot.
Oh.
But it was all part of the convict staying, wasn't it? They
Yeah.
wanted to get rid of it. They changed the name of Van Diemen's Land to Tasmania to get away from the coast.
Yeah, of course.
Might be interested in the suffering of this prisoner, though. This is the memorial stone. It faces out to sea. Somebody gave that for this ex-prisoner who had it's an unbelievable life. It says on the front something bland like George Britton died age 53 at Port Arthur in 1861.
Right.
But it doesn't tell his story because he was a prisoner for 28 years.
Wow.
He received 2 death sentences, which were both commuted to life. He worked more than 16 years hard labour in chains. On 52 occasions, he was sent to solitary confinement.
Wow.
He went to the flogging triangle 17 times,
Wow.
received 766 lashes, made 12 escape attempts, made 6 separate visits to Port Arthur, and even found time to go to Norfolk Island twice as well.
Goodness. And Norfolk was
Horrendous.
tougher than here, wasn't it?
Yeah. On his last visit to Port Arthur, he was working as the powder monkey in the quarries, and one day he lit the fuse and just stayed where he was.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Sad.
All right, you move that way a little bit. I'm
Yep.
going to come and find you again.
That's I won't get all of them. I'll just get a few. But it certainly tells the story.
They'd certainly tell a story. They're absolutely amazing.
So there are some pretty bizarre ways you could end up on the Isle of the Dead. This guy here, David Lowry, He was a soldier and he died at the age of 19. I think his first name was David. Now he was at Eagle Hawk Neck. And as a soldier there, I guess they were pretty bored when there were no runaways around. Just wasting time. So David Lowry was there one day and he found a stick and he thought, oh, this looks a bit like a spear. So he threw it at his mate. And his mate thought, oh, this looks like a good game. So he threw it back and he hit his friend in the temple, and that's how he's ended up here.
Oh, wow. Oops. Not good.
Not good at all.
Some pretty bizarre words on these stones. This one here, it says, when Jesus calls, my dust shall rise. Sounds like Leonard Cohen's been in it.
It does. Maybe that novelist had something to do with it.
Of course, we're not meant to mock these stones.
No, of course.
No.
But if it just said John Smith, age 85, died after a long and boring life, nothing amusing about his death or quirky about the stone, well, it wouldn't be a story, would it? So in that respect, these two are very good together. Now when you think what a stonemason's going to put in a stone today, you probably think he or she would copy something from a document. Get the name right, the dates right, and the epitage it should be. Then perhaps this one was copied from something. Just look at it, it's all beautifully done, beautifully spaced. Until you get down here. And it looks like the stonemason's got all these words left, there are only 4 lines to get them on. Private Robert Young, he was a soldier. He went out to the boys' prison one night with a doctor and 2 prisoners rowing a boat, and on the way back he fell overboard. He was wearing what they called a greatcoat, which was made out of wool. And if you've ever taken a woolen jumper out of a washing machine, like a
Heavy.
jumper,
Heavy as.
he didn't surface for 8 minutes.
Wow.
By that time, of course, he was gone.
Yeah.
Now this one here, usually, or very often, people's favourite on the island. I'm thinking this is taken by what the stonemason remembered, rather than copied from something.
Okay.
James McDivitt, 2 years old, son of a soldier who drowned at Eagle Hawk Neck. But there was never a soldier at the settlement called McDivitt. There was, however, a soldier called McDavid, who lost a son aged 2 to drowning at Eagle Hawk Neck, and this McDavid was Scottish. Saying McDavid in a Scottish accent, it might sound like McDivitt. There's been a murder.
That's right.
There are at least 6 spelling mistakes on this one.
I guess that's how you see, people with corrections in the yesteryear with a little the little signature making the error.
Yeah, even with spell check we still get
Yeah.
No, that's right.
those, don't we? So he spells years, Y-E-R-S. Parent down there is spelt like the fruit. But I like to think this stonemason had a wonderful sense of humour. He was told to add more punctuation to his efforts. So there are 65 full stops on this stone.
So what's
was gonna say, there's
what's
lots
that
of
last
divots.
word? What's the last word that he's...
K-O-L-I, that's King's Own Light Infantry. That was a regiment of his dad.
Ah, okay.
And just to the right of that, above it, is Amen, which he spells full stop A, full stop Men, full stop.
That could be interpreted several ways, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Brilliant. I got a spare thought for this one. Joseph Kerr, the very first burial on the island. Now he was a soldier who died in 1831, so 2 years before the island became the Isle of the Dead. Therefore, to start with, he was buried over there at the settlement. In 1833, they exhumed his body and they reburied him out here. But to start with, they put him in the convict section, so they had to dig him up again.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you can now rest in peace.
Now these larger ones are known as chest vaults. Body's still 6 feet under, but it's obviously a more elaborate memorial. And this is a tragic case of medical negligence.
From the doctor?
From the man dispensing the medicines. Edward Cart, he was only 4 months old when he was given opium as a laxative by mistake.
Oh.
He was drugged. Probably.
He should have got something called calomel and magnesia. Calomel is mercury based and also horrible. but he got opium and magnesia instead.
Wow.
The weird thing about it, he was one of the sons of the superintendent of convicts of Van Diemen's Land, and the closest Port Arthur got to a riot was when his dad came down to the settlement and gave the prisoners a spray. Told them that from now on they'd be having breakfast at 6 in the morning rather than 8. That is to say, their working day would be longer. They'd have to wear their ridiculous canary yellow convict uniforms. From now on they were forbidden to grow their own vegetables and fish. From now on they would be having musters on Sundays. And he was probably still babbling on when they started picking up rocks and throwing them at him. So Commandant Booth had to save the day. He marched down from his house up there, down that street, strode into the prisoners' barracks, and according to his journal, he quietened the prisoners with his annihilating countenance and stentorian voice. And he was only 5'6".
Oh.
There was, of course, an inquiry after this little boy's death, but the convict who dispensed the medicine was cleared of any
Wrongdoing. Malpractice.
What is it? Intent to hurt.
So these ones here, they actually got the actual bodies underneath them, or so these are actually in situ, as far as the bodies are relevant to the underneath. Yeah.
Now this one here, very interesting. It belongs to not Anne White, but Anne Gibbons. Now she was married to a soldier and she died during childbirth. Normally that would be the end of her little one, but the ladies of the settlement came together and nursed her young one, breaking down all the barriers of social class. Even the commissariat officer's wife, Charlotte Longprairie, got involved, something that almost certainly wouldn't have happened had she died in Hobart.
Wow.
Oh, amazing, isn't it? There wasn't much of a difference in social status, it seems, being a foot soldier and a convict. In fact, a number of soldiers deliberately committed offences to get out of the British Army because they thought life as a convict would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad but true.
Well, they were saying a lot of the prisoners that went to solitary confinement took it as a holiday rather than logging up that mountain.
Yeah.
You can't blame them.
No, you can't blame them at all, can you?
No.
Ah.
This one here, Benjamin Horn, now he was a man given a job by the government to go and write a report on the boys' prison 9 years after it opened, and he was appalled by what he saw out there. Kids running around with nothing on their feet, no education, living in squalor. But as he did write this, even though he wrote this scathing report, he did come back and try and help the boys by becoming their headmaster.
Oh, okay.
There you go, headmaster school Port Cook. However, he was only there 3 months before he succumbed to tuberculosis. Now the boys did the inscription for their late headmaster, and they spelt his name wrong. They also spelt where they lived wrong, and at the bottom they spelt the word sincerely incorrectly as well. And that sentence with sincerely in it is very interesting because it reads, sincerely regretted by all who knew him. Surely it was a turn of phrase, eh?
Comedic. To morning groups of Christians cheering hope.
Do either of you two like ghosts or believe in ghosts?
Yeah,
Yeah?
100%.
Well, the haunted house, the real haunted house at Port Arthur is the parsonage, and it's said to be haunted by the spirit of this man,
Oh, okay.
Reverend George Eastman. You type into Google Australia's most haunted, and the parsonage usually is in the list. Anyway, the theory behind it, George was at Port Arthur 15 years. He worked for the church and government, and he died suddenly in his bed upstairs. And even though he worked for those two entities all that time, neither would give his surviving family of 11 a pension, and they were evicted from the parsonage without a bean, and they say that's why he's still in there. On top of that, he was a very large man, and as I say, he died upstairs. And if you go in the parsonage, you'll see the staircase upstairs is ludicrously steep. So in their wisdom back then, they thought it'd be best to take his dead body out of the top window.
Yeah, and throw him out.
Well, apparently the knots in the ropes came loose, he slid free down the roof, head first into the shrubbery.
Wow.
He was very well respected though by people who didn't need to pay his family a pension. These steps used to lead up to a gate where people would leave flowers as a mark of respect.
I wonder what the steps are for.
It's a hue and pine fence.
Wow.
Oh wow.
I'm sure you're wondering about this one though.
Yes.
It's very good in the light. Look at that. This is
Oh,
the only
wow.
one left with all the graveside furniture, the headstone, footstone, border and railings.
Wow.
Incidentally, the footstone just has Eliza Aylett's initials and the year she died on it. It's also the only grave facing west.
Okay.
Now Eliza and James came out to the new name Tasmania. James's father was already here. He had been transported. Now what's one of the most awkward things you can think about trying to steal before people had trucks? Well, James's father was transported for stealing a piano.
Oh,
Wow.
gosh.
Why does this one face west? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's a late burial, 1869, and I suppose, well, as James was the underkeeper in the separate prison over there, I suppose if he took the vegetation down, the grave and the separate prison would face each other.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't count for all those graves facing north, does it? When traditionally graves faced east.
Yeah.
The church of Port Arthur faces east. That's no accident. The cemetery at the top of the site next to the server, all those graves are facing east.
Okay.
But these are facing north. Maybe something to do with the lie of the land. Bit of an anticlimax, but we don't know why they're facing north. Sorry. I've got to ask you this question to finish. Well, first off, I mentioned this one here, Margaret Wilkie. She was the youngest. She was only 6 hours old.
Oh.
But who were the real prisoners back in the day? Because if childbirth was the thing most likely to kill you as a female, and yet it was normal to have 10 or more children, it can't have been a picnic for the ladies, can it?
Definitely
And
not.
this one here, an example of that. Harriet Chatfield, it says on the stone, she's not dead but sleepeth. She
Sleep.
died at the age of 39 after complications with her 13th pregnancy.
Wow.
Are they back for us?
Yeah.
So I thought better mention that just in case.
He's running. He's waiting.
Yep, we're coming.
We go back this way.
Yeah.
That's it,
Oh,
guys.
thanks so much for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it was
The
a
boat's waiting for us, guys. We have
thoroughly
to
enjoyed it.
run because they're actually waiting for us.
No, we're about to
We
go
had that
back.
private
We did the
tour.
tour this morning, the Essentials tour,
But,
and now we're going to go back and just do the whole thing at our own leisure.
When you get off the boat, there's a big gulf where we always meet.
Oh, yep.
You don't fancy walking anywhere, just get in there and
Oh, yeah.
they'll give you a lift all the way up to the top.
Oh, thanks for that. Appreciate that heads up.
The only people they won't get are 20-year-old athletes.
That's. I'll start limping when we get off the boat. Well, also help with the age factor.
but what a beautiful place to be buried, eh? On an island.
Yeah.
Good old Van Diemen's Land. Okay, better turn off now and we'll film again soon.